Alright, good morning. Welcome to the re-recording for Texturing 4. This is where we'll be learning about creating bump maps. Specifically for this assignment, we'll be creating a bump map of our tiling Cinderblock texture that we worked with for Texturing 3. So, just reminders about assigning textures up here. So we are going to be working in a new material channel. So we have been playing with color throughout the year. So just assigning a base color by choosing it in Maya for most of the year. Now we've moved on to assigning texture to the color channel to give a, more than just a solid color for that color channel. Now we're moving into bump maps and the bump channel, which is what defines the roughness for a given material. So if our material for our cinder block is the cinder block material, we're describing the roughness of this cinder block material. So let me make sure I got my cinder block set as my project. I'll go ahead and open my file. This will be Cinderblock demo, right? Pretty sure. And so it doesn't have the texture applied to it, I don't think. So let me go ahead and assign a blend. And so I'll go ahead and, as long as my project is set, I should be able to easily assign a Cinderblock base texture there. Let's open that up. So that's where we should be as we start. Texture applied, UV maps obviously were prepared in Texturing 3. So I just have my UV map set here. You can see that the squares are all evenly distributed, so we're all good there. Alright, so I'm going to actually go ahead and switch gears into Photoshop. And I'm going to open up my base Cinderblock texture here. Also, before I get ahead of myself, I am going to go into my Cinderblock. And let me get rid of my ones that I already have in here so that they don't get in the way. Okay. So, we are here to make a bump map. Now, like I said, bump maps will define the roughness of a given material. So how does a bump map work? Here's your little cheat sheet. 50% gray is this background color here. So we are working I'm not going to edit this now. So we're working from 50% gray. As it approaches black, it gets pushed down. And as it gets raised up by using white on your bump map. So here to actually demonstrate how that looks, where is it? Test bump. It's right here. Okay. So let me go back into Maya real quick. So right click, go to my material attributes. So if I were to go to my bump mapping channel, and I'll just assign a file there. Bump value is where you would assign your bump texture. So you can see that here. So we're going to go to our material, we click on bump mapping, go into the bump value thing, and then you just assign your file node as normal. So here I want to show you what an example of a test bump would look like. So I threw this into mine already. So again, if you see this little, it's just white and black X's on middle on 50% gray. And so in some places here, this would be one of the black X's. This is where it's pressed in. The white X's you can see are raised out. And so it tries to approximate that little faking of depth, even though those impressions are not really there, right? So 50% gray, keep things even and normal. And then if it's black, it gets pressed in, and if it's white, it gets raised out. So let us go back to Photoshop. So here we have the Cinderblock texture. And I will point out before I get too far ahead of myself, bump value versus bump depth. So it's actually really quite simple. We don't really mess with bump depth too much. If you click this, it'll go back to that little bump node thing that I was showing you a second ago. Bump value is just what is the bump setting. That is your texture. How and where is it what value of bump. then this bump depth is simply a multiplier, right? So you can increase it heavily, you can decrease it heavily, right? Heck, you can even invert it. So, I think you want bump depth of 1. Yep, there we go. And so that is that on that. Now coming back to this. So, there are ways of making your bump map manually, which we'll be getting into in our CAN project. But there are also some times where you might simply run a quick procedural filter over this to create a bump map. It works out pretty well for what we're working with this tileable texture here. Again, though, obviously the concept is still usable manually, right? If you wanted to, you could use a levels to get the same result that we're going to get quickly from our high pass. It's just you'll have much more manual control if you go that route. This, you're just telling Photoshop, hey, figure it out. It's probably good. So, at times you'll need to use your brain and do it manually, like on the CAN project. For today, though, we're going to let Photoshop figure it out. So that is a high pass filter. Under the filters menu, down to the bottom menu for other, and then choose high pass. So let's go back into Photoshop. Filter, other, high pass. And then you'll get a result that looks like this. Now the note here being run your high pass, and then choose a filter number that is relatively small. The more you increase this value, the less helpful it is for our bump map. It can make it quite noisy, and the noisier your bump map is, the more pixelated and kind of scuffed your roughness information will look. So usually between 1 and 2 is where I aim for. So I'll put it on 2. And there you go. Well, that's it. We just open it up. We run our filter in this case. Now, sometimes you won't be doing that. You'll be doing it manually. But that is that for that. So let's go ahead and save this out. Cinderblock texture _B. Now, why do we put _B? Because this is a different texture than our base texture. Also, the format you want to choose is a Targa format. Now, why Targa? Targa is a lossless, or a relatively lossless, relatively either cleanly compressed or relatively uncompressed file format. I forget the nomenclature. But it is a professionally used file format. So Targa _B to signify this is our bump. So make sure you're saving it out as a 24-bit Targa with _B. And make sure it's going into your source images, right? Let's go back here. Let's go into source images, _B, Targa, hit save. Then it'll ask you how many bits per pixel. 24 is almost always going to be the key. So hit OK. And whoops, that's that. So let me go back to my material attributes. So let me break this connection. And then what if I was doing this from scratch? So we have just our material with our color channel. Again, to add a bump map, you'll go to the bump mapping channel, click the box, tell it you're adding a file. When you get to the bump node, just remember you're a bump value. That'll bring us to our file node, and then you just got to tell it which file to put in. And this will be Cinderblock texture B. Hit OK. So now you can see this roughness information all over the Cinderblock. Right? Very rough. So that is it for this part. Now you can see as I rotate around, it does get kind of shiny. That's what we'll be handling on our next lecture with the spec map. So that is it for bump maps. Again, I want to reiterate, starts at 50% gray. Black makes things get pushed in. White makes things get raised up. And you can use this high pass filter on things to procedurally get an outcome, as long as that's going to work out well. You'll see on our CAN project, it doesn't always work that way. So, that all being said, that is it for this lecture. Thank you for watching.